I am here to talk about the future, and not just some abstract future, but your future, a future you're going to live to see in a very short period of time, an amazing future. And in this presentation today, I only have one graph I'm going to show you, and so let's just get it out of the way, okay? This is that graph. That is worldwide per capita income for the last 2,000 years. Average income around the world for the last 2,000 years. And you can see that for 1,750 years, nothing happened. And then all of a sudden that line shot up. What happened there? Well, that is the invention of the scientific method. That's when we learned how to systematize the acquisition of knowledge. We could take something we learned and use it to learn something else and learn something else, and we got that compounding effect. And there's no reason in the world to believe that line isn't going to go up as far as the eye can see. In fact, if you think about it, new things come along so frequently, new technologies come out that we're kind of jaded by it all. It's all kind of mundane to us. We hardly even notice it. I mean, think about it. You can do things that in the past would have only been attributed to gods. You can, for instance, talk to people. Talk to people anywhere in the world as if they're in the room with you, for free, basically. You can see things as they happen around the world, as they're happening, as if you sat atop Mount Olympus watching. You can change the weather in this room by pushing a button. You can fly through the air at the speed of sound, 5 miles above the face of the earth. And, back in the day, if you had a question, you had to go make a pilgrimage to an oracle, and you would ask the oracle, and the oracle would just give you an answer you could interpret any way you wanted. What do we have? We have Google. Quarter of a second is all it takes. And then we have things that had the gods really existed, they would not have been able to understand. What I'm going to show you next is actually a photograph, not a drawing, and that is a machine. And in the middle is where you put a single cell, and that needle is how you inject it with DNA. I say all of this because I deeply believe in something called progress. Things get better over time. Now, it may not seem that way, especially if you saw the news this morning, or yesterday morning, or tomorrow morning. But things get better all over the world, over the long arc of history, by any measure, life expectancy, infant mortality, status, education levels, literacy, all of it. Things get better. But why do they get better? Why do things actually get better? For 2 reasons, actually. The first is civilization. Civilization is how we learn to get along better with each other. We figure it out. And I would love to talk about that, but time does not permit. I'll just say that without civilization, we have chaos and anarchy. But the other reason things get better is because of technology. What is technology? We talk about it a lot, we use the word a lot, but what do we mean? I like to think of it as things that multiply human ability. You can hear me better because I'm using a piece of technology than if I wasn't. Now, it would be tempting to say that, we've seen a certain amount of technological progress in our day, and our parents saw some, and their parents saw some, and it's all kind of the same, but this is not true. This was first noticed by this man, Gordon Moore. He coined something we call Moore's Law, and he was one of the founders of Intel. And by the way, he's still alive. And Moore's Law says that the power of computers doubles every 2 years. Now, other people came along and said, you know what, it's not just computers that do that. Many, if not most technologies behave the same way. They double on a periodic basis. It's not every 2 years. Some may double every 5 years. Some may double every 50 years. But they double, and then they double, and then they double, and they double. And humans are really bad at understanding what a big deal that is. Because nothing in the real world does that, does it? You don't wake up in the morning with 2 kids, then the next morning 4, 8, 16. Your bank account similarly doesn't do that. And so we always tend to underestimate what a big deal it is when you double and double and double, because at some point things get big, and then they double again, and then they double again, and then they get just astronomically big. So what does it mean? It means that it took us 3,000 years to get from the abacus to the iPad. And in 25 years, we're going to have something as far ahead of the iPad as it is ahead of the abacus. Something we can't even imagine. None of us could imagine. But I actually think it means something even more profound than that. I think it means that for the set of problems in the world that are just technical problems, and many aren't, don't get me wrong, but there is a set of problems in the world that are merely technical. They are not things that have to be that way. They're just things we haven't figured out yet. For those problems, you are going to live to see solutions to them. Why can I be so confident? Well, we're up there. We have this technology now that when it doubles, that's a lot of new technology. It may have taken 5,000 years to make your laptop, and if it's not good enough, don't worry about it. In 2 years, it's going to be twice as good. Still not good enough? 2 more years, it'll be twice as good. We're up there in that spot where when things double, it's enormous. Now again, there are a lot of problems that are not technical problems. There's anger and hatred and evilness and all of that in the world, and technology doesn't do that. I mean, our great challenge as people is to become better human beings, and technology doesn't really help with that. But for that other class of problems, the ones that are just technical, things that don't have to be, you're going to live to see solutions to them, because we're in that period of time where doubling is a big deal. What are some examples of these? Well, you're going to live to see the end of disease. Disease is a technical problem. Maybe we could all agree to that. You don't have to have disease. We just don't know how to solve it. Why would I be so confident? Well, this is probably the second worst disease ever. That's smallpox. And we made a vaccine for that. This guy did, Jenner, in the 1700s, before we even knew germs existed. And so you think about that. We were able to defeat that thing back then. And today, what can we do? What can we do? We can sequence the genome. We can stare into the soul of the pathogen. We can run simulations on 1 million in a second. And disease can't change that quickly. You're going to live to see the end of hunger. Hunger is a technical problem, right? You don't have to have hunger. In fact, the earth does not strain to feed its people. It's to our collective shame that we already throw away enough food. To feed all the hungry people in the world. And yet you're going to live to see the end of hunger. Why would I be so confident? Well, it used to be that it took 90% of us to make our food. And in parts of the world now, it takes 3%. And in other parts of the world, it's still more than that. But everywhere, it falls. Everywhere it falls. You're going to live to see the end of poverty. Poverty is a technical problem. You don't have to have poor countries to have rich countries. You don't have to have poor people to have rich people. And why can I be so confident you're going to live to see the end of poverty? Well, that's an easy one. You see, in the last 120 years, 85% of all economic growth has come from technology. I think we know that intuitively, don't we? I don't work harder than my grandparents ever did, but I live a much more lavish life than they could have ever imagined. Why? Because an hour of my labor yields so much more than an hour of theirs ever did. So what's going to happen to poverty when that line in that graph that I showed you goes up 1,000-fold? And you're going to live to see cheap or free energy. Why can I be so sure? Well, energy is literally the most abundant thing in the universe, isn't it? And we just don't have the technology to harvest it. You could run all of India for a year on the energy in one typhoon. That's just a technical problem, how you figure that out. We live on a planet that conveniently the oceans rise and fall every day, storing energy and releasing energy. Just a technical problem to solve. We live on a planet with a molten core. It hasn't cooled since it was created. In fact, to a depth we can already drill to, there's 50,000 times as much energy as all the oil and gas reserves in the world. And then, of course, there's winds in the upper atmosphere that blow 200 miles an hour and they never stop. And then, of course, we have the sun, which rains down power on this planet. Every year, 4 million exajoules of energy hit the Earth. What do you suppose we need? All human activity in the world. How much energy do you think that takes? 500. 4 million hit the Earth. We just need 500. That's it. That's just a technical problem. And then, fingers crossed, we have fusion reactors. We're building fusion reactors around the world. We're going to build little suns. And that's all over the place going to happen. Could this be true? I mean, really? Or could somebody just talking fast and smooth make it sound like it's true? I'm going to give you one piece of evidence, one proof point of everything I have just said. And it's this newspaper ad. Some of you are young, you may not remember these, but in newspapers, you opened them up, and there would be these full-page ads with everything that was on special that week. And the important thing about this ad from Radio Shack is that it is from 1996. That's important. And the punchline of the story is that 10 years after that ad ran, your smartphone did every single thing in it. It was your all-weather stereo, your AM, your clock radio, your calculator, your music playing thing. It was your computer, your camcorder, your answering machine, your telephone, and all of the rest. And if somebody had told you in 1996, they would say, hey, in just 10 years, you're going to carry a smartphone in your pocket. Everybody's going to have them. They're going to be free with the 2-year contract. Little kids are going to have them. And there's going to be this thing called the App Store where there's 2 million more things it can do, and they're $1 each. And somebody in 1996 would say, no, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Things do not happen that fast. And you don't need me to tell you that things are moving a lot faster now than they were back in the olden days of 1996, right? It used to be a new technology came along and we had a generation to absorb it. But just think of all of the ones that we have, all at once, hitting us all at once. Of course, there's computers, right? I mean, that would be all it would take, but that's just one, right? We also have all these advances in robotics where we build machines to duplicate what our bodies do or do things they can't do. We have the cloud where we're essentially building a worldwide knowledge base that we can all have access to and we can all interact with. We're learning about nanotechnology, about how to manipulate things at the molecular level and make them do amazing things we can hardly imagine. We're creating new materials that have properties that still surprise us. And then there's blockchain. I mean, blockchain isn't just cryptocurrency. Blockchain is a technology that says you and I don't have any reason to trust each other, but with this technology, we can deal with each other in confidence. Then there's augmented reality, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, which is what I write books about, and 3D printing. You know, 3D printing isn't like printing a new knob for your radio that you've lost. Far from it. I mean, I live in a little town, 50,000 people. And in my town, there's a subdivision of 100 houses being 3D printed. I mean, I've seen them. I've been there. I've watched the extrusion machines build these houses. We're building devices that will allow people who can't walk to walk again. We're making robots that do dangerous work that people don't have to do anymore. We make toys that children can control with their minds. We build devices that can sort recyclables and spare a person from having to do that. We build robots that can carry huge burdens, freeing people from backbreaking work. We give sight back to the blind. They're making a version of this with a zoom on it, a zoom. And in the future, when you get sick, you're going to take a little pill like this, and it's going to swim to whatever organ it needs to and release the medicine there. We're going to deliver electricity wirelessly. We're going to be able to make clean water for everyone, and that's big. By one account, if everyone in the world had access to clean water, half of the hospital beds would empty out. half of them. This thing can purify a gallon of water for a penny, a cent. And this, from a South African company, is a nanotech tea bag you can swirl in the dirtiest water you can find, and it'll make it as clean as bottled water. And it's biodegradable, by the way. We're building prosthetics that feel like human flesh, and prosthetics that people can hold above their head, which is evidently an incredibly difficult engineering task. Solar panels that are more efficient than any plant that has ever existed. We're about to 3D print veins. You'll be able to 3D print livers and hearts very soon, and they'll be your liver and heart. Take a few of your cells, grow a new one of these, and you're good to go. We have 1,000 products on the market that I know of that employ nanotech, that take on new characteristics. We'll have people do their professions remotely. We'll have GPS satellites guiding the tractors. All of it, all of it. All of this is real. All of this is here. But what are the consequences of it all? A lot of people are afraid it looks something like this. There's a narrative, I'm sure you've heard, that 1% do real well in this world, and the 99%, they lose their jobs, they're in poverty. Movies like to tell that story again and again. I remember that movie Elysium. I want to tell you the common elements in all of these movies. They're just alike. The 99% live on the ground. They're physically bent over by the toil. They're physically dirty. They always have dirt on them. And the 1%, well, they always live up in the sky. Everything up there is nice and clean and wonderful. The most expensive movie ever made. It's called Metropolis, adjusted for inflation. And in it, the 99%, look, they're bent over. They're dirty, backbreaking work. The 1%, well, they live up in the sky where everything's nice and clean. I know this audience must have a couple of Star Trek fans. There's an episode called The Cloudminders, the 99%, living on the ground. Notice they rub dirt on their costumes. Where do you suppose the 1% live? Well, they live up in the sky where everything's beautiful. Again and again and again and again and again and again and again, you hear the story, and we start doing something. It's called reasoning from fictional evidence. I do it. You know, I do it. You hear that narrative. Oh, the 1% are going to do great, the 99% aren't. And you think, I've seen that before. And it's like, yeah, that was a Will Smith movie last month. But it's just a story. It's not true. It only feels that way because we've seen it so many times. We've talked about it so many times. But there's no actual reason to believe that. Now, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. People have always been worried about labor-saving technology. You may know the story about how when the automatic loom came out, the weavers were afraid it was going to take their livelihoods, so they would take their wooden shoes off, their sabots, and they would throw them in the machine to break the machine, and that gave us the word sabotage. In the 1820s, in England, there were the thresher riots where they were worried the automatic thresher was going to take everybody's job. And so people rioted, and then they busted up these machines. It's only labor-saving technology people are worried about. Only labor-saving technology. Nobody throws their shoe in an air conditioning unit because it doesn't look like it takes somebody's job. Now, I get the reasoning, right? If you take a job a person used to have and you give it to a robot, you have one fewer job and you have one unemployed person. It seems like simple math, doesn't it? But the funny thing about it is how obviously untrue it is. Used to be millions of these people, stable boys, and then somebody came along and invented the car. Used to be tons of elevator operators. Then they invented the button. You never hear stories of roving bands of rogue elevator operators terrorizing the streets at night. Used to be boys or kids that delivered telegrams. Somebody had to go and invent the phone and put them all out of work. Used to have people that made the candles. Then they made the light bulb. They all lost their jobs. Used to have kids that set up the bowling pins. What were they replaced by? They were literally replaced by robots, right? Used to have people that lit the street lights at night. Then they invented the switch. Used to have people that delivered ice for your ice box. Then they made the frost-free freezer. Used to have people that swept the streets, and then they made a machine that did the work of 20. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not minimizing what happened to those people. I'm sure those were really bad and hard times. But I have a deep belief, and that is that if there is a job out there that a machine can do, if you make a person do that job, we have a word for that, and that word is dehumanizing. You're saying to that person, you're saying, I don't need you to be a person. I just need you to be a machine I don't have. So just don't do anything but just be this machine. That's all I need you to do. And that is so dehumanizing to people. It's so much a waste of human potential to say, you're just a stand-in for a machine I don't own or a machine we have not yet invented. And the sooner we can get rid of that, the dehumanizing jobs, the better. Now, I'm not trying to sugarcoat it. The transition's always very hard. But I want to point out that what technology does, what I said at the beginning, is it magnifies human ability. It makes you more productive. And that increases wages. Always. You see, if you don't believe that, then you should lobby for a law that makes everybody work with one arm tied behind their back. And you know what? You would just create a lot of jobs because it takes so much more now to do anything. But those jobs won't pay anything because you just destroyed productivity. So technology just gives everybody a third arm. Everybody. Now, I suspect some of you are thinking, well, that sounds good in abstract, but that's not exactly how it works, is it? You see, the world is full of a range of jobs. You have jobs here that are low wage, low skill, like maybe an order taker at a fast food restaurant, okay? And then you have jobs up here that are high tech, high pay. And here's what people say, and they're right, by the way. Here's what they say. They say, the problem is technology creates new jobs up here, like a geneticist. And technology destroys all the jobs down here, like the order taker at the fast food place. And then they pose a question. They say, do you really think this person has the skills to do that job? Are they going to be able to be retrained to be a geneticist? And the answer is no, that is not how it works. The person who gets the geneticist job is the college biology professor. But guess what? There's an opening at the college that the high school biology teacher will fill. Now, guess what? There's an opening at the high school. They hire the substitute teacher. Oh my gosh, now all the way down the line. The question is not, can that person do that job? The question is, can everybody do a job a little bit harder than the job they have today? And if the answer to that question is yes, which I think it is, that's 250 years of economic history from the moment that line turned and went up. You see, much of the world has had rising wages over the last 250 years, and mostly full employment. And yet, I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out the half-life of a job, and I think it's 50 years. And by that I mean, I think every 50 years we lose half of all the jobs. I don't have a sense it's any faster or slower than that now, but every 50 years we're losing half the jobs. And so you say, wait a minute, how is it that we're keeping most people employed And wages are rising. It's because of that. Technology destroys the jobs at the bottom, creates the new ones at the top. We shift up a notch, destroys the jobs at the bottom, creates new ones at the top, we shift up again. That's how this all works. So sure, technology is going to eliminate jobs. Order takers at fast food. Probably is going to eliminate 50% of all the jobs in the next half century. But by the way, I can't think of one job it's eliminated in the last 5 years. Not one. Like, we've been afraid of it all this time, but just one. I can tell you, though, I can tell you exactly why that's so hard for people kind of to internalize. I remember, and so what I was going to say is this is not what our future looks like. This is what our future is going to look like. We're not going to have the people we need to do all of the things that technology will empower us to do. But I know why it's so frightening. I remember when the early days of the internet, like when we knew it was going to be a big thing, mid-90s. And if you asked people then, you said, what's this thing going to do to jobs? They're going to say, oh, the stockbrokers, out of business. The travel agents, gone. The newspapers, going to have a hard time. The shopping malls, going to close down. People are going to buy online. On and on and on. And you know what? They would have been right about everything. Everything. You can always see what it's going to destroy. But none of those people would say, oh, jobs? Oh, there's going to be Uber, Airbnb, eBay, Etsy, Facebook, Google, Amazon, all of the rest. 1 million new companies. But none of us can see what it's going to create. But we can all see what it's going to destroy. That's pretty easy. But you just can't see what it's going to make from our vantage point. You just can't. But you just have to remember the basics. Technology increases productivity. It empowers people to do more. That's good. I'd like to talk a brief bit about artificial intelligence. Like I said, that's what I write about. That's my thing. And it seems like a lot of people think it's a special case. Like it's something different than just the bread and butter technology increases productivity story. And they say, yeah, but this is different. This is different. But the thing is, I would say kind of the biggest problem with artificial intelligence and how we think about it is that the phrase means two unrelated things. Like consider the word pool, P-O-O-L. Do I mean a swimming pool or do I mean the game pool? You don't know, right? Those aren't related to each other. They're just the same word. And unfortunately, that's the case with artificial intelligence. It means two unrelated things. The first is something we call narrow artificial intelligence. And that's something we know how to do today. And it's a pretty simple technology. The idea is simple. The idea has been around for 70 years. It says this. It says take a lot of data about the past, study it, look for patterns, and use those patterns to predict the future. You can see off the top, by the way, it only works where the future is like the past. It can identify cats because tomorrow's cat looks like yesterday's cat. But putting that aside, that's the technology we have. It can identify the spam in your email, right? Because spam looks the same tomorrow as yesterday. You get a lot of emails, you study them, you look for patterns, and you predict it. That's what routes you through traffic. It's a wonderful technology. And the reason we're getting so much better at it is we have so much more compute. We have our better computers and more data. But it's a pretty standard technology. It makes predictions about the future. But the other thing artificial intelligence means is something we call general intelligence. And that is an AI that's like you and I. It can figure things out on its own. It's creative. It can learn new things. It can teach itself new things. And that's a technology that We don't know how to build. 100% agreement in the world on that statement. But the problem is, and I'll talk more about it here in just a second, but the problem is when somebody says, this spam filter uses AI, that's a true statement. And then when somebody else says, artificial intelligence might be an existential threat to humanity, well, they aren't talking about your spam filter going rogue. They're talking about this other technology, this super, the one you see in the movies, right? They're talking about Commander Data from Star Trek. They're talking about C-3PO. They're talking about Ex Machina. They're talking about that movie, Her. That's what they're talking about, a technology that does not exist, and we don't know how to build. I used to have this podcast on artificial intelligence, and I loved it because a lot of the early thinkers are still with us, and they would all return my phone call. And I said, I want to document this moment. I want to gather these folks up. It is the most boring podcast around because it's just two people spending an hour talking about artificial intelligence, like in a slow, methodical way. But I always started with those 100 people. I always began with the same question. Well, I would say, what is artificial intelligence? But once we got over that, I would say, do you believe we can make general intelligence? Are we going to be able to make a robot like us? And 97 people said yes. 3 said no. I could tell you the 3, like not just like rounding numbers. 97% of people said yes. And that's interesting, isn't it? Because my next question should be obvious. Well, if we don't know how to build it, why are you so sure we can make it? And they all gave me the same answer. Variants of exactly the same answer. They said, well, we know it's possible to build machines with general intelligence because we are machines with general intelligence. So you know the thought experiment. If I could copy every one of your cells down to the atomic level and make another one of you, wouldn't it be as smart as you and all of that? So 97% of them say, we're machines, we have general intelligence, therefore we can build it. When I would ask them when we're going to get it, the range was 5 to 500 years. I don't know what you do with that, other than, I mean, if you dropped your dry cleaning off, when's it going to be ready? Oh, 5 to 500 days. But they're right. Now, when I would go to general audiences and say, raise your hand if you think people are machines. There's nothing in you other than chemicals and electricity. 15% people raise their hands. Now, I'll be honest. If we are machines, then someday we will build a mechanical person, and in 2 years it will be twice as good, in 2 years it'll be twice as good, in 2 years it'll be twice as good, and you know, I don't know what would happen, frankly. But if we're not machines, if we're not just machines, and you don't actually have to go all spiritual to believe that. I mean, a single neuron may be more complicated than a supercomputer. It may have things going on in it down at the Planck level. That is the fundamental resolution of the universe itself. So you don't have to think like all mystically to say we're not machines. You just have to believe there's aspects of our intelligence that you can't duplicate in a fab. And then if we're not machines in any real sense, then there'll never be an artificial intelligence, ever, that can do what people do. I want to close on this slide, which is, I've always been fascinated by utopian literature. It began in 1650. There's a really good reason for that. I'm almost out of time, so I won't go into that. 1650 is when people started imagining the better world, what it would be like, and writing about it, telling stories about it. And what was interesting, they had some pretty crazy ideas, frankly. They said, wouldn't it be something if in the future there was a place we could pick our own rulers instead of having kings? And wouldn't it be great if we educated everybody, not just the elites? What if we had legal equality between men and women? What if people could pick their own religion instead of having to believe the state religion? And on and on and on. And you know what? I mean, you don't need me to tell you that. We haven't delivered on all of that. but we're clearly on a path towards it. And so it's appropriate for us to ask what we think utopia looks like. We think utopia looks like. What is it that we think the better world is going to be? Because we can build it. It can be built. We have to decide what it is. And as I was writing this talk, I was thinking to myself, I think about the future a lot. I talk about the future a lot. I write about the future a lot. But if we're ever going to live in that city, if we're ever going to build that world, it's not going to be people like me that do it. It's going to be people like you. So I wish you luck. Thank you very much.
For more interesting content, like, comment, and subscribe to our NASSCOM YouTube channel.